Welcome back to Candid Conversations. Today we're jumping into part 2 of my discussion with author and attorney Justin Whitmel Earley. If you missed part 1, I encourage you to go back and listen. We covered Justin's story and how habits we practice shape our spiritual and emotional lives more than we often realize. In this second half, we explore the rhythms of rest and Sabbath, the gift of sleep, how we think about control, and how our daily patterns form not just us, but also our children. Let's pick up right where we left off.
Justin, what do you say to the person who, well, I'll say even the person who was kind of where you were when you were kind of going through this crisis and panic attacks and all this sort of thing? I mean, work ethic is, we even have the Protestant work ethic, right? This is like what drives us, right? But it's like, in a sense, it can go a little bit too far. Is it about having control? Is it about we have too much information in this day and age? But let's think about that person, and they're going to some sort of professional, and the professional saying medication, this will help you. I think that's your own story.
Yep.
And that's not working out for them, or they think it might work out, wherever they are in that phase of that journey.
Yes.
What do you say to that person who's it's desperation, and perhaps they're hearing this and going, I'm not sure if I buy into the habit thing.
Yeah. I wrote The Body Teaches the Soul with my self in mind. It is the book I wish I could have, if I could go back in time, and hand myself what I learned since. Of course, then I would have missed all the work the Lord did. But
right.
What I'm trying to do in The Body Teaches the Soul is give the person you described, Jonathan, the gift of saying the Lord loves you and he cares about how you're feeling in your body, how you're fraying spiritually, and he invites you into his love through the spiritual and the physical disciplines. I'll just pick one, okay? Chapter 4 in the book is on sleep. The first reason I knew that something was going haywire in my life in the anxiety crisis was because I kept waking up at night and then eventually not sleeping, and then eventually panicking because I'm not sleeping, and then eventually panicking about maybe I'm worried about work, maybe I'm worried about this. But the thing that started it was an inability to sleep. And I look back now and I realized that I had cultivated a life that made no room for natural rest. I was staying up late. I was waking up early. I was scrolling at all hours, sometimes even in the middle of the night, God forbid. Some people actually do this. My phone was with me first thing in the morning. I was eating really poorly. I at certain times, not in the alcoholic sense, but I never drank too much, but I often drank too often. As in, like, I now see that I was
self-medicating, or
at one point it was self-medicating. I was also just unaware of what even a moderate amount of alcohol, which I think is totally acceptable, does to your sleep. And so if you just put all that together, I was living in a way that made healthy sleep, very, very difficult. And it was that first set me off. I wish I could go back and tell that man what I learned in researching this book. And that is that sleep is a feature, not a flaw of your existence. God made you like him and yet unlike him. And anybody who knows their theology means every time we say something that we are like God, we're also infinitely unlike him because he is infinitely more.
His attributes, sure.
Yes. But God made us like him in our need and affinity for rest, right? This is why he rests on the seventh day, and he invites us into Sabbath rest. And one of the things that changed my life in that time was just actually accepting the invitation to a weekly rhythm of Sabbath, not because he would love me more, not because I needed to do this to be a good Christian, not because it was a mistake, a sin, or a flaw to miss a day or check one email on that day, but because it was a gift. It was a gift of saying, my work is finished for you on the cross. You'll never add to my work. let's start the week in rest. That's why Sunday's the beginning of the week.
Right.
Start with saying the most important work in the world of salvation is done. And now, as Tim Keller would say, now you're not resting from the work. You're actually working from the rest. When I started actually taking Sabbath seriously, it changed my lawyering life. I also wish I knew at that time how much sleep is a little mini reflection of Sabbath every day.
Yeah.
I did not know how to cultivate. I talk a lot about gardening the body in this book, about how your body is more like a garden than not. It's not automatic. It's not one thing that you do.
Right.
It's a slow cultivation process. This is why the body often talks about you in terms of farming metaphors, fruits of the spirit. Jesus' parables are often like, yeah, hey, I'm the vine, you're the branches.
Right.
I have good biblical, roots for this metaphor, pun intended.
Right.
But I didn't know how to garden sleep. And I didn't know, Jonathan, that in this regard, I'm unlike God. No, the God of Israel does not slumber, nor does he sleep. He keeps watch. God does not need a nap. He enjoys rest, but he does not need a nap because he is infinite. He is omnipotent. I am not. You need a nap. You need a rest. You need to actually recharge. This is I would call it liturgy of demonstrating who you are. You need to sleep. You need to become vulnerable, unconscious. You need to wake up again to a world that you didn't make, a son that you did not call forward, events that you do not control, and say, my goodness,
I'm not
his mercies
God.
are new every morning. I am not God. Praise God that he is. I mentioned those two things because every chapter in the book gives you a spiritual discipline, Sabbath in this case, and a physical discipline, sleep in this case, to try to, by the way, the physical discipline is actually giving you practices for a sleep routine, just purely in the health space. But of course, everything biological is also theological. Like cultivating a healthy sleep rhythm is, I think, one very important building block of cultivating a life that knows how to rest in God. And when you put those together, I had no idea how much sleep and Sabbath would be just keystone habits in coming back to a place of peace in my life. I thought it would just be like, you need to know the gospel, Justin. I was aware verbally of the gospel. It turns out participating in the gospel on a Sabbath rhythm of saying he really did die so I can rest. Practicing sleeping, he really is God so I can rest.
That is the gospel. That is an outflow of the gospel. But I think you're right. It's like people want to condense it to Jesus died for my sin and now I'm saved. And it's like, well, wait a second. You got to pull all the elements out. What does that mean? What does it mean to actually enter into his rest?
It doesn't mean less than you think. It just means a lot more than you think. I can't be clear enough. None of this will change God's love for you. But we all agree that God's love for us should change everything we do. So your habits won't change God's love for you, but God's love for you should definitely change your habits. And these are the places where I wish I could have handed myself this book and say, it is part of your spirituality to cultivate rest and sleep. This is not a side project. Don't feel vain. Don't even feel like, oh, you're off in the woo-woo psychobabble world of life hacks. You're like, no, you're in the beautiful realm of a recovered Orthodox Christianity that cares about your embodied life.
Timeless truth.
Yes.
It's interesting that the concept of waking up and saying, you know what, I'm not God, and praise the Lord that I'm not. I mean, there is a sense in which a lot of this kind of boils down to control, right? I want to control my environment. I want to control my outcomes. We're certainly in the day and age of outrage, where I'm outraged about climate. I'm outraged about politics. I'm outraged about all these things. And I really have no control over those things. But we feel like in this modern era that we live in, that we do have a sense of control. And I think that's what you're writing to, and there's a freedom and a joy in being able to hand those things over. And to your point of the Kuyperian view of like, you know what, the Lord has given me a territory and a place, and I'm going to be the missionary in that space. But I'm not in control of all the elements and all the things that outcomes that have to come from that.
Just diving into that for one quick second, this is why, Jonathan, the gardening metaphor became so precious to me in this book, because it was not only helping me understand the reality of embodiment, which everybody who you talk about any conversation on the body, and you're going to start talking about, well, but I'm sick, I have cancer, I have autoimmune stuff, I can't, and you're going to be like, yes, you're more like a garden than not. If you do nothing, it'll turn into a desert. Like, so if you ignore the body, that Gnostic error,
Yes.
then you are going to wreak havoc in your garden or your body. But if you idolize your efforts in it, that other error, you're going to quickly be humbled that you are not in control. Like, there's so much that you cannot control. It's only that third way of imaging God through our body, thinking of it like the garden, where we become a faithful steward in the garden, where we say, well, clearly God didn't say, just throw in the towel, you're not in control. Like, his sovereignty does not produce that kind of result, rightly understood. It produces a co-laborer, a steward, somebody who says, I will do my part faithfully because of God's faithfulness to me. That is so true of your body, exercise, eating, sleeping. But as you pointed out, Jonathan, I think this is really important. I long to witness to our generation this metaphor that you don't need to have an anxiety crisis over climate change. You don't need to, because this is the garden God has given us to steward. Should we care about it? Absolutely. Right. He made it. He loves us. We're stewards of it. We should not ruin the garden God gave us. But we're not. You don't have to. This is not existential crisis up to you. Right. And by the way, your government, this administration, that administration, this city, that new talking head, this social media personality, it's right to have something to say. You can have an idea,
sure,
but you're not responsible for stopping this movement in the world. No one can do that. And actually, the most Christian view of politics, I'm going to go out on a limb and say this, is a humble one that admits we're actually not quite certain how to solve this problem. We're not quite certain what this event will lead to, or that event, or this leader will actually do if they're in office. It's a lot more humble. Like, a true Christian view of politics is to say, I think we can agree on the values. How we actually get to human dignity for the immigrant is actually a bit up for debate. Like, I don't really know. I don't mean to do a huge tangent here. I just mean to say that idea that you're called to be a faithful steward, a gardener, helps you so much in your body. It helps you so much in the world to be like, oh, I'm not responsible for the outcomes, but I can be faithful with the small things. And it also helps you realize this apparent paradox of grace and legalism, where you're called to work, but you're not called to the result. This is where Dallas Willard was so good. You know, the gospel is opposed to earning, but it's not opposed to effort. It invites you to enjoy God and your sanctification. And as it turns out, there are things that he gives you to do there.
Yeah. I can't let you go without asking, because we have parents and grandparents that are listening and thinking about this, of course, for themselves. But then it's like, how do I begin to instill these into my children so that they have healthy patterns, so that they don't have to go through a nervous breakdown where they're kind of trying to figure everything out?
I wrote a great book you can read called Habits of the Household, and everybody can go apply this. But the non-advertising answer is, this was my question as I started to think about the life of habit and the spirituality there. And it wasn't but a couple thoughts into this where I was like, wait a minute, if I'm becoming my habits and I'm looking at my kids and they're becoming a version of me, my habits are one of the most significant parts of my children's spiritual formation. Right. And so I would just say two brief things. One, think that through. Like, take that seriously. You cannot disciple unless you're being discipled. Yeah. You can't train a child in the way that he or she should go unless you're walking in that way. Most of our parenting is by intuition. The kids are watching, they're seeing, they're imitating. Okay. Yeah. As important as words are and teaching are, I do Bible studies with my boys. I tell them stuff, but I think a lot about what do they feel like at home, because they're feeling their way into what is a father, what is a man, what does a disciple look like and feel like. And Habits of the Household is all about how to take that idea and put it into practice in the house. Like, if that's true, how might it change your nighttime routine? For me, it was using bedtime blessings instead of shouting them to bed. If that's true, how would it change your family dinner? For me, it was actually having one instead of skipping them all and staying at the office. Yeah. If that's true, how would it change your screen time? For us, that was saying, we need to be mostly off in our household and only sometimes on purpose on, because the household is the place for relationship, not distraction. It's for creation, not consumerism. It's for education, not entertainment. And so it was getting rid of screens. In discipline, it was like, well, how might I change my responses of yelling at my kids to maybe praying and then going into discipline? Because theme of this conversation, you got to fight habit with habit. Like, you didn't think your way into this problem, you practice your way there. So how could you practice your way out? Habits of the household is lots of little ideas for you to practice your way into discipling your kids.
Absolutely fantastic. And I hope our listeners are really kind of hearing this and going to buy your book, but really considering, what does this look like? How am I looking at what I'm doing and how that's actually forming me and my children are replicating that.
Yeah.
Justin Whitmel Earley, Habits of the Household, The Body Teaches the Soul. Brother, it's been such a privilege to have you on Candid Conversations. Thank you for joining us.
It's been a delightful conversation, Jonathan. Thank you.
God bless your family in the Richmond area, and I want to come to one of your family dinners. It sounds awesome.
They're pretty raucous. You're open invite as of now. If you show up, you can come over.
That'd be great. Thanks, brother.
You're welcome, man.
Spiritual maturity isn't just about thinking rightly. It's about our whole selves. If you're listening and today's conversation struck a chord, I encourage you to pick up a copy of The Body Teaches the Soul. You'll find practical, grace-filled guidance for reordering your habits in light of the gospel. You can learn more about Justin's other books at justinwhitmelearley.com. We'll post links in the show notes. As always, thank you for joining us here at Candid Conversations.